Most people believe they're doing everything right. They work hard. They budget carefully. They try to keep their home neat, their relationships calm, their intentions positive. And yet, despite all of that, something always feels just a little off. As if money arrives but slips away. As if peace is present but never lasts. As if no matter how hard they try, something invisible is working quietly against them. And that something may be sitting right in front of them every single day. You see, your dining table isn't just a place to eat. In Feng Shui, it's the energetic heart of your home, the space that reflects how you receive, how you connect, and how you allow wealth to enter and stay. But here's the part no one tells you. When you casually remove something from your table, thinking it's clutter, cleaning up after a meal, or trying to keep things minimal, you may be disrupting the exact energy field that's trying to support your success. This isn't about superstition. This is about design. Subtle, intentional, symbolic design. Because in Feng Shui, everything speaks. And your table, it's constantly in conversation with the energy of your home, your body, your bank account, even your future. What you keep on it matters. What you remove matters even more. Most people don't even realize they're making the mistake. They're just doing what they've always done, clearing the table before guests arrive, swiping everything off when the week feels overwhelming, thinking that simplicity means power, when in truth, they're deleting the very symbols that hold that power in place. So ask yourself, have you ever had a stretch of time where everything felt harder than it should? Where income slowed? Where tension in the family felt thicker than usual? Where meals became rushed or empty of connection? If so, your dining table may be trying to tell you something. And today, we're going to listen. We're going to explore the 9 most powerful items that, when placed with care and intention on your table, don't just decorate your space. They protect it. They amplify it. They turn your meals into magnets for abundance, your routines into rituals of support, and your home into a space where prosperity doesn't just visit, it stays. But if you've been removing them, if even one of these has been missing, you may have unknowingly unplugged the very flow of wealth you've been waiting for. So stay with me, because what you'll learn in the next few minutes could change not just how your table looks, but how your life feels. We're not rearranging furniture, we're realigning your field. And the moment you understand what each of these 9 items represents, you'll never look at your home or your fortune the same way again. Number 1, coins or red envelopes, a tiny anchor for financial security. You made it here for a reason. Something inside you knows there's more to wealth than just effort and numbers. And as we step into the first object, the most overlooked and misunderstood anchor on the dining table, I want you to pause and think about the last time you saw coins on a surface in your home. Did it feel accidental, messy, like something that needed to be cleaned up or swept aside? Because here's the paradox that most people never consider. What you rush to remove may be the exact thing holding your financial stability in place. In Feng Shui, coins or red envelopes are more than tradition. They are conscious choices, signals, grounding devices that help your environment mirror your financial intent. And when placed on your dining table, the core space where energy gathers, conversations unfold, and abundance is shared, they do something quietly powerful. They root prosperity. They catch energy before it slips away. They transform a flat surface into a field of retention. Not accumulation through greed, but retention through care, through presence, through the choice to say, I want what nourishes me to stay. The reason this matters is because most people think of money as something they control by force. More hours, more strategy, more grind. But in Feng Shui, money is water. And water doesn't obey control, it obeys channels. And if your table isn't set up to channel it, it moves on without apology. Coins, just 3, just 5, just 8, arranged with intention are enough to shift that current. They tell the energy of your space, we honor wealth. We are ready to hold it. The use of red envelopes takes this further. Red doesn't just stand out visually, it activates. It corresponds with the fire element, and fire, when managed well, is what ignites opportunities, sustains warmth, and keeps circulation flowing. A small red envelope filled with clean coins resting on a table isn't a decoration. It's a declaration, a soft, quiet one, the kind that doesn't demand to be seen but is always felt. Here's the part that surprises most people. When coins are placed without care, they do nothing. And worse, when placed near the wrong items, they may even cause harm. Have you ever left money near trash or next to dirty dishes, thinking it didn't matter? In Feng Shui, that's like asking wealth to sit beside waste. The energy doesn't just get confused, it gets blocked. It turns in on itself. That's why coins should never be left crumpled, greasy, or placed randomly. Because energy, like people, responds to how it's treated. Show it respect and it stays. Ignore it and it leaves. This isn't about being superstitious. It's about being intentional. And intention is the most powerful design principle of all. It's the difference between having a home that looks good and a home that feels aligned. And maybe, just maybe, this is the part where things click. Because how many of us have been taught to chase wealth but never to hold it? To celebrate receiving it, but never to learn the language of honoring it once it arrives. A small red envelope on your table isn't there to impress anyone. It's not there for guests or for show. It's there for the space itself. It's there to whisper into the room, this family knows how to hold onto good things. You'd be surprised how many successful homes that flow with steady income, peace, and groundedness, practice this without ever talking about it. You'll walk in and see a folded envelope near the center of the table, or a polished coin tray placed with quiet pride. You might think it's habit, but it's alignment. It's the space reflecting back the values of the people who live there. And yet, for all its simplicity, this practice is one of the first things people abandon, because it looks too small to matter. Too easy, too quiet, and that's the trap. In Feng Shui, it's often the smallest things that hold the greatest weight, not because of their size, but because of their signal. And when that signal is clear, when the table says wealth is welcome here, something shifts in the atmosphere. Conversations feel calmer, tension eases, decisions sharpen. It's not magic, it's the result of a space holding you the way you're trying to hold your life. And that kind of support changes everything. So the real question isn't, should I put coins on my table? It's, what does my table currently say about the way I treat money? Does it speak of respect, of readiness, of quiet gratitude, or does it speak of absence, of rushing, of forgetting what matters most after the meal ends? Because every single object is telling a story, even the smallest one. And the story your coins or red envelope tell becomes the story of how wealth moves in your life. And maybe you've never thought about it this way before. Maybe until now, coins were just coins and red envelopes were just for holidays. But now you know, and with that knowing comes choice. You can clear your table like always, or you can place something there that says, this time I'm ready to receive and to keep. Not because of luck, but because you finally gave your space permission to align with your intention. Wealth doesn't always come from outside. Sometimes it starts with the way you set the table, and the smallest object, held with care, can become the anchor that stops everything from slipping away. Number 2, candles, the forgotten flame that fuels abundance. If coins are the quiet anchors of wealth, then candles are the breath that keeps that wealth alive. They're often overlooked because of their simplicity, just wax and flame, right? But ask yourself this: when was the last time your home felt warm, not just in temperature, but in spirit? When was the last time the dining table didn't just look clean, but felt alive? Because in Feng Shui, fire is more than a flame. It's the invisible engine that circulates energy through your space, fuels progress, and prevents your intentions from burning out before they manifest. And without it, no matter how well you arrange everything else, your home may end up feeling hollow, stagnant, or emotionally cold, and you won't even realize why. The absence of fire energy doesn't always show up in dramatic ways. It shows up in low moods, slow money, shallow conversations. It shows up in that feeling where everything seems fine, but nothing really moves. And this is where candles come in, not as decor, but as functional tools for activating the most dynamic element on your table. Unlike water, which flows, or earth, which stabilizes, fire transforms. It shifts the room. It stirs the air. It awakens what's been dormant. That's why when placed intentionally on the dining table, a candle does more than cast light. It sets an emotional tone. It tells the energy in your home that warmth, clarity, and connection are not only welcome, but expected. But here's the part no one talks about. In many modern households, especially in minimalist or high-functioning spaces, fire is the element that disappears first. We sanitize, we simplify, we remove anything that flickers, smokes, or drips, and in doing so, we also strip away the warmth. And then we wonder why meals feel rushed, why family members grow quiet, why joy doesn't linger. A table without fire may look peaceful, but it often feels incomplete. And that incompleteness creates small emotional gaps that slowly affect everything from finances to family dynamics. Because energy doesn't just need to flow, it needs to burn, to circulate, to stay alive. Without that spark, even the best intentions lose momentum. Think about it. You can have a beautiful table, perfectly clean, thoughtfully set, maybe even with coins or a centerpiece in place. But without a flame, without a source of fire, it's just stillness. And stillness, when unbalanced, becomes stagnation. This is why so many people unconsciously feel heavier after dinner, more irritable over time, or quietly disconnected even in a shared space. The environment isn't broken, it's just incomplete. Because when fire is missing, the energy that should be rising starts settling instead. And settled energy over time becomes stale energy. Candles offer the solution in the gentlest, most elegant way. Their light doesn't scream, it softens. Their presence doesn't dominate, it harmonizes. And in a room filled with wood from the table, earth from ceramics, metal from utensils, and water from drinks, candles supply the missing fire to balance the 5 elements. That balance isn't just theoretical, it has visible effects. Meals become more relaxed. Words flow more easily. Even money-related conversations feel less stressful, as if the flame is quietly burning away tension. But this only works when candles are chosen and used with clarity. Color, for instance, carries symbolic weight. Red candles ignite prosperity and action, while yellow invites abundance, confidence, and warmth. The holders matter, too. Metallic ones like copper or gold amplify fire's richness and grounding strength, while clear glass adds elegance without dulling the energetic impact. Even the way you extinguish a candle has significance. Blowing it out suddenly may seem harmless, but in energy terms, it's like cutting off a conversation mid-sentence. Fire deserves a graceful goodbye. A snuffed flame sends a signal of closure, of respect, of completed intention. Now, here's where it gets personal. Have you ever noticed how different a conversation feels by candlelight? How even simple meals take on a tone of gratitude and presence when soft light flickers across the table? That's not nostalgia. That's not coincidence. That's energetic design doing what it's meant to do, pulling people inward, grounding their attention, softening their edges. And when that happens at the table, where decisions are made, emotions are exchanged, and nourishment is shared, its effect ripples outward into every area of your life. You leave the table calmer, you speak with more clarity, you trust yourself more deeply, and that internal harmony sets the stage for external abundance. But let's reverse it for a moment. What does it mean when there is no candlelight? When the table is lit only by overhead LEDs, or worse, when it's not lit at all? What message does that send to the space, to your subconscious? Often it's a message of transience, of rushing, of survival mode. And if you're constantly eating in that kind of environment, it's no wonder the energy of stability, of financial ease, feels elusive. The space isn't resisting you, it's just confused. And confusion, even in small forms, weakens intention. That's why the simple act of placing a candle at the center of your table, lighting it with calm hands, and letting it burn as you share a meal, can be one of the most powerful energetic resets in your entire home. It doesn't have to be big, it doesn't have to be expensive, it just has to be consistent and respected. That consistency creates rhythm, and rhythm is what keeps energy moving in cycles of growth. Now, I'm not suggesting that every table must look like a ceremonial altar. I'm saying that your table should reflect the kind of life you want to nourish. If that life includes abundance, clarity, peace, and connection, then fire must be part of it. Because fire is what makes things move. It turns raw into cooked, idea into action, effort into transformation. And perhaps the most beautiful thing about the candle is its duality. It holds light and heat. It illuminates while it burns. It gives while it consumes. It is both presence and impermanence, reminding us that wealth, too, must be honored as it arrives, not just chased when it's gone. When you allow a candle to live on your table, not as a decoration, but as a quiet partner, you begin to see your space not as a backdrop to your life, but as a co-creator of it. So maybe it's not that wealth is avoiding you. Maybe it's just waiting for the fire to be lit again. Maybe all it takes is a small flame in the right place to change the entire conversation happening inside your home. Because in a house where every element is in balance, and where even a single candle is given space to speak, prosperity doesn't just visit, it finds a reason to stay. Number 3, full water pitcher, the flow that reflects your finances. If the candle brings warmth and movement into your home, then water brings its rhythm. It's not loud, it doesn't command attention, but it's always communicating something, and the message is either, we flow with life, or we're stuck in lack. The pitcher on your dining table isn't just for serving drinks. In Feng Shui, it is a visible metaphor for your household's ability to receive, hold, and circulate abundance. And perhaps without knowing it, the way your water pitcher looks, feels, and functions may be echoing directly into your finances. Because what you place at the center of your table doesn't just serve the body, it reflects the mindset. And water, more than any other element, reveals what you're ready to hold, or what you're unconsciously letting slip away. Let's ask the question no one usually asks. Have you ever sat down to a meal and noticed an empty water pitcher on the table? Did you refill it? Did you feel a pause, a slight inconvenience, maybe even a small emotional friction you didn't understand? Now consider this. What if that emptiness didn't just inconvenience you physically, but energetically? In Feng Shui, water symbolizes more than hydration. It represents wealth, adaptability, emotional clarity, and the subconscious patterns of flow in your home. A full pitcher sends a message of readiness. It says, "We have more than enough to nourish ourselves and others." But an empty pitcher, even one left that way for only a short time, can suggest depletion, fatigue, or energetic blockage. And when that message repeats meal after meal, it becomes an imprint, a habit, a silent story of lack disguised as convenience. And maybe the most surprising part is this. You can have a beautifully decorated table, fresh flowers in place, even a glowing candle burning at the center. And still, if your pitcher is empty, the energy of abundance gets interrupted. It's like playing a song with one note missing. You feel the gap even if you can't name it. That's because water doesn't just participate, it connects. It moves between. It binds all the other elements together. It's the only element that reaches everything on the table, cups, dishes, people. And in doing so, it becomes the bridge that helps energy travel between intention and result. So when it's missing, that bridge collapses. And what's left is isolation, segments, stagnation. And when your environment reflects separation, your financial patterns often mirror that too, through inconsistent cash flow, unexplainable delays, or plans that always feel almost, but never quite come through. Now let's reverse the lens. Think about a time when your table had a full pitcher, not just full in volume, but full in presence. Cold, clear, clean water waiting to be poured, shared, appreciated. What was the mood of that space? Lighter. More welcoming, more grounded. That isn't coincidence, that's alignment. Because a full water pitcher speaks directly to your nervous system and says, "You're safe, you're supported, you're in flow." And when the body receives that message, it stops bracing for scarcity. It softens. And from that softness, wiser financial decisions are made. Opportunities feel easier to approach. Conversations become less about pressure, more about possibility. Water carries memory, and the pitcher, being its vessel, carries the story of how your household relates to both giving and receiving. If you're always serving others but rarely replenishing yourself, the pitcher will reflect that. If you withhold or hesitate to refill it because you don't want to waste, that pattern might be echoing into how you manage savings, or how you delay upgrades for yourself while saying yes to everyone else. So here's a question to sit with, not just logically but emotionally. When your pitcher is empty, is it because it ran out naturally, or because no one remembered to fill it? And what does that say about your relationship to wealth, time, self-care? There's another layer that goes deeper still, placement. In Feng Shui, positioning the pitcher in the center of the table or toward the southeast, the wealth corner, magnifies its effect. But this only works if the pitcher is well cared for. Clean, functional, not chipped or cloudy. Because just like the flow of money, water must be respected. If it's ignored, if it's symbolic only but not living in practice, it loses its charge. You'll sense it, your meals will feel heavier, your space duller, and you won't be able to name why. That's how subtle but powerful water is. It either works for you invisibly or works against you invisibly. And if you want to increase the potency of this quiet symbol, there are ways to enhance it without overwhelming the space. Place a Feng Shui coin beneath the pitcher to signal grounded wealth. Add a small piece of citrine inside the pitcher. Yes, directly into the water, as a magnet for abundance and clarity. Not for drama, not for superstition, but because energy responds to intentional combinations, and these additions remind your space what you're cultivating. Flow with structure, clarity with movement, generosity with discernment. And maybe this is the part that helps something click, not because you've never heard that water is important, but because you've never felt how the absence of water has been affecting the mood in your home. How even something as simple as an empty pitcher can create an undercurrent of tension or not enough. And how correcting it isn't about extravagance, it's about awareness. Small changes like this don't shout, but they do shift. And over time, those shifts add up to a completely different emotional and energetic baseline. So what does your table say today? Does it say, "We're nourished, prepared, and ready to share"? Or does it quietly murmur, "We ran out and forgot to refill"? That single gesture of seeing the pitcher low and choosing to restore it isn't about the water. It's about what you're telling your space, your family, and your future self. That you're present, that you're attentive, that you are creating a space where wealth doesn't have to be earned harder every day, it just needs to be held better. Because abundance doesn't shout, it flows. And where water flows freely, money follows. Number 4, fresh fruit, a bowl of wealth hiding in plain sight. If water is the element that carries prosperity into the home, then fruit is the form that gives it life. There's something ancient and instinctive about the presence of fresh fruit on a table, something that transcends culture, trends, and design. But what most people don't realize is that in Feng Shui, fruit isn't just food. It's energy made visible. It's the quiet declaration that this home is abundant, this family is flourishing, and this space is ready to receive joy. Because fruit doesn't just nourish the body, it nourishes the space. And when it's chosen with intention, cared for with presence, and placed with clarity, it becomes one of the most powerful symbols of active wealth a household can hold. But let's begin with a simple question. When you walk into a room and see a bowl of fresh, colorful fruit, how does it make you feel? What shifts inside you when you see oranges stacked like golden coins, apples polished like gems, pomegranates cracked open to reveal their treasure like seeds? That response isn't just emotional, it's energetic. Because these fruits have been revered for centuries as more than snacks, they've been viewed as offerings, invitations, and reflections of what a family believes it deserves to experience. Bright colors like orange and red awaken the fire element. Smooth, full shapes radiate the energy of wholeness and expansion. And the act of placing fruit on a table signals to the space that growth, nourishment, and joy are not just welcome, they're expected. This is why Feng Shui regards fruit as one of the most accessible and potent tools for financial attraction and emotional harmony. But here's where things get nuanced. Most people think of fruit as temporary, something to be consumed quickly, replaced when remembered or purchased occasionally. And so, even when fruit is present, it's often passive, left to sit, fade, and eventually spoil. And this is where energy begins to reverse. Because a bowl of rotting fruit doesn't just smell unpleasant, it sends a message of neglect, of decay, of things left too long, forgotten, or dismissed. And in Feng Shui, that message is loud. It echoes into how energy circulates in the home, how decisions are made, and how fortune either thrives or falters. Think of it this way: your dining table is the energetic altar of the household. It's where attention gathers, where nourishment is exchanged, and where unspoken values are displayed every day without a single word. And in the center of that altar, you have the option to place either something alive and vibrant, or something fading and avoided. Which message do you think your home responds to? What story does your fruit bowl tell? Fruit, when used with intention, becomes a mirror. It reflects how consistently you tend to beauty, how openly you express care, and how willing you are to invite joy into the ordinary. Oranges are not just rich in color. They are historically tied to wealth, optimism, and vibrant energy. Apples are seen as symbols of peace and family unity. Pomegranates, with their abundance of seeds, represent fertility, creativity, and multiplied fortune. These are not random associations. They are deeply rooted in the emotional memory of the human experience. And when these fruits are placed at the center of your meals, your conversations, your daily rhythm, they infuse every interaction with that symbolism. But here's where things become even more subtle and more powerful. The practice of keeping fruit fresh, rotating it before it spoils, and maintaining the bowl with care becomes a living metaphor for how you manage the wealth you already have. Do you let good things linger too long, hoping they'll stay sweet even as they soften and mold? Do you forget to replenish the things that once brought you joy? Or do you notice, refresh, and stay engaged with the health of what surrounds you? These questions aren't about produce. They're about your relationship to flow. Because just like money, fruit must be used while it's vibrant, shared while it's full of life, and replaced before it drains the energy of the space. And perhaps what most people don't consider is how this single bowl of fruit can influence far more than mood. It can shift the emotional temperature of the entire home. A table that holds fruit feels generous. It feels loved. It feels like someone lives there who pays attention to the seasons, to the body, to the quiet signs of nourishment that don't come in the form of big gestures, but in consistent, small care. That energy becomes contagious. Children feel it as safety. Guests feel it as warmth. Even conversations tend to soften, as if the fruit itself absorbs the tension and returns something sweeter in its place. And yet, the danger lies in forgetting, in letting the bowl sit untouched, in allowing fruit to rot in plain sight and pretending not to see it. Because rot, in energetic terms, is not just decay, it's permission. It tells your space that it's okay to let things die quietly, to hold onto what no longer serves, to keep presenting beauty that no longer exists. And that permission bleeds into other areas, your finances, your emotional boundaries, your clarity. That's why fruit must be maintained, not just for appearance, but for alignment. So ask yourself, not just practically, but symbolically, what is the state of the fruit on your table right now? Is it alive? Is it clean, bright, and firm to the touch? Or has it been overlooked, passed by day after day, no longer seen as meaningful? Because your answer doesn't just describe your table, it describes your energy field. And by choosing to tend to this one small detail, you're choosing to rewire how your home speaks abundance back to you. And just as the water pitcher held memory, the fruit bowl holds mood. It's not a centerpiece, it's a frequency. And every time you pass it, touch it, or replace its contents, you're signaling your ability to care for what is beautiful, to notice when something changes, and to keep your environment in a state of active receptivity. That's how wealth flows in, not through sudden windfalls, but through spaces that are already prepared to receive it with grace. So while others may walk past their tables, thinking the fruit is just a detail, you'll know better. You'll understand that in Feng Shui, nothing is just a detail. Everything is a choice. And your bowl of fruit may be saying more about your future than your bank account ever could. Number 5, bread, a quiet signal that says, we will never starve. If fruit represents the joy and brightness of abundance, then bread speaks to its core. Not flashy, not decorative, but dependable, and that's what makes it so powerful. Because in Feng Shui, bread doesn't just symbolize wealth, it speaks of the quiet confidence that there will always be enough. Enough to eat, enough to share, enough to build something steady. And sometimes, the most potent energy shifts come not from what's luxurious, but from what's foundational. Take a moment to look at your dining table. What's there? What message does it send before a single word is spoken? Is it polished but bare? clean but cold. Because in the pursuit of simplicity, many homes unintentionally strip their tables of the very symbols that communicate security. Bread may seem too humble to matter, but its presence is one of the oldest human gestures of preparation. It says, "This home is ready, this family is fed, this table remembers what matters most." And yet minimalism has trained us to clear everything, to remove, to reduce. We think that less equals clarity, and sometimes it does. But in Feng Shui, when it comes to food, an empty table can feel less like peace and more like absence. And absence, when it becomes a pattern, can quietly convince the subconscious that scarcity is normal. That survival is the baseline. That planning for lack is smarter than expecting nourishment. Bread interrupts that narrative, not dramatically, not with loud symbols or bright colors, but with presence. When a loaf of bread sits at the center of the table, even untouched, it tells the space. There is stability here. There is preparation. We are not lacking, we are layered. That layer is what shifts the mood of the home. You may not feel it consciously, but your nervous system notices. Your sense of timing changes. Your decision-making softens. And it's not because bread has magic, but because symbols train the mind. And when your table becomes a visual cue for steadiness, your thoughts begin to follow. Your energy begins to rest. And your home becomes a place where crisis isn't the default, it's the exception. Now consider this. How many times have you walked past a dining table that looked perfect but sterile? The kind that appears in magazines but not in memory. And then contrast that with the memory of a table with bread on it. A basket, a crust, a wrapped roll, something that speaks not of display but of real life, of being fed, of being full. One makes you pause, the other makes you feel. And in Feng Shui, feeling is everything. Because it's feeling, not logic, that determines whether a space supports you or drains you. The presence of bread brings energy downward into the root chakra, into the part of you that needs to feel grounded in order to grow. Without that grounding, even the best ideas, the most ambitious goals, float around without form. But bread changes that. It creates energetic weight, not heaviness, but anchoring. And when your life is anchored in daily signals of readiness, you make fewer fear-based decisions. You don't rush into purchases, you don't hoard. You don't panic at temporary delays. You know there's a base. You feel it. And your actions reflect that stability. This is especially important in homes where financial trauma has occurred, where scarcity was once real, where meals were once uncertain. In those homes, placing bread on the table can be a subtle form of healing, a way of saying to the child self, to the past versions of the family, we're safe now. We've built something solid. We're not chasing, we're sustaining. And that shift, quiet as it is, ripples through conversations, through habits, through how money is treated, not as something to cling to, but as something to partner with. But this only works when the gesture is lived, not just copied. A stale loaf, forgotten and hardening at the corner of the table, says the opposite. It says we started something and didn't finish. It says we lost touch. That's why bread, like all sacred objects in Feng Shui, must be maintained. Touched, replaced, eaten, integrated into life. When it is, the table doesn't just host meals, it holds energy, it reflects care. And care in any form is an invitation for prosperity to stay. Bread is also one of the few items that crosses cultural, spiritual, and economic lines. It shows up in rituals, in blessings, in weddings, in war. It is the language of survival and the symbol of comfort. And when we choose to place it on the table with intention, we're not just decorating. We're anchoring the emotional blueprint of our home. We're saying, we remember what sustains us, and we honor it. So ask yourself, not out of pressure, but with honest curiosity, When was the last time your table held something that made you feel deeply fed, even before eating? Has your space leaned too far into aesthetics and forgotten emotion? Does the center of your table reflect readiness or absence? Because how you set that space sets the tone for what your mind believes is possible and what your home believes it can provide. And perhaps the most remarkable thing is this: placing bread on the table costs almost nothing, but says everything. It doesn't need to be gourmet. It doesn't need to be symbolic in anyone else's eyes. It only needs to be there with presence. Because presence is what turns bread into a message, into a ritual, into a quiet, stabilizing force in the daily rhythm of your life. And so, while others may clear their table in the name of design, you'll understand the power of leaving just one small signal behind. A piece of bread, a symbol of rootedness, a quiet agreement between you and your space that no matter what's happening outside, this home is fed, this table is ready, and this life is steady. Not in show, but in truth. Number 6, fresh flowers, beauty that blocks bad luck. If bread is the anchor of security, then flowers are the breath of life. They don't feed the body the way bread does, but they nourish something just as vital, the spirit of the space. And this is where most people get it wrong. They think of flowers as extra, as ornamental, as nice when available but unnecessary. Yet in Feng Shui, flowers are far from decorative. They are energetic amplifiers, emotional filters, and subtle messengers that either lift a space or leave it dull. And when your table feels heavy, conversations feel sharp, or your thoughts feel flat, it might not be a mood. It might be a missing signal of life. Because what happens when nature disappears from a home? What fills the space when freshness is absent, when growth is no longer represented, when every object is static? The energy begins to settle, not peacefully, but inertly. It stagnates. You feel it as friction between people who used to connect easily, as silence in rooms that once carried laughter, as a general sense that something's missing even when everything looks fine. And that's the danger. Stale energy doesn't crash in. It drips, it seeps, and before long it wraps itself around your home like a fog until joy becomes effort and clarity becomes rare. Fresh flowers undo that slowly, beautifully, and powerfully. They reintroduce yang energy, the rising, bright, expansive quality that draws fortune in and pushes heaviness out. But more than that, they remind your home that something here is still growing. That beauty still belongs. That change is still welcome. And in a home where luck feels stuck, where tension hangs quietly in the corners, sometimes the shift begins with something as soft and colorful as a bloom opening beside a plate. The dining table, after all, is more than just a place to eat. It's where emotional currents are exchanged. It's where unspoken stories unfold between bites. And when flowers are present, those stories shift, not dramatically, but enough to invite ease back into the room. But the flowers must be fresh. That part is not optional, because just like with fruit, the energetic difference between living and dying is enormous. A wilted flower doesn't just fail to help, it actively drains. It holds the frequency of decline, of beauty lost, of energy expired. And when that vibration sits on your table, your center of fortune, it slowly saps the joy, the creativity, and the clarity you're trying to build. That's why the ritual matters, choosing the flower, changing the water, trimming the stem. All of it says, I'm willing to tend to what's alive. I'm willing to care for what nourishes not just the body, but the feeling of the home. And the choice of flower isn't random either. Each one carries its own symbolic frequency. Gerberas, with their bold, open faces, represent success and cheerful resilience. Orchids whisper luxury and refinement. the kind of energy that doesn't chase but attracts. Chrysanthemums, long celebrated in Eastern traditions, offer longevity and enduring blessings. Peonies, soft and lush, radiate luck in matters of both love and finance. These aren't abstract ideas. They're emotional codes, and when placed with care, they create a resonance that informs every conversation that happens in their presence. Imagine a home where fresh flowers are placed not for show, but for flow. A family sits down to eat, and in the center of the table, a vase of golden chrysanthemums glows beneath warm light. No one comments on it, but everyone feels it. The room feels clearer. The meal feels more sacred. The air itself feels lighter. This isn't fantasy. This is the lived reality of a space that's being energetically instructed to support growth, to make room for optimism, to remember the feeling of being cared for. And maybe that's the part most people overlook. That flowers don't just affect the room, they affect how people treat one another inside the room. A home with fresh flowers is often a home where patience lasts a little longer, where jokes come a little easier, where eyes lift more often. And in Feng Shui, this isn't accidental, it's cause and effect. The flower becomes the cue becomes the feeling becomes the energy. And that energy either invites wealth or quietly shuts the door on it. But just like with anything sacred, neglect turns beauty into burden. When flowers go unwatered, when vases turn cloudy, when petals fall and scatter across the table without care, the message reverses. It says, what was once vibrant is no longer important. And that message echoes through the home's energetic field. You might notice it in small ways: a deal that doesn't close, a miscommunication that escalates, a sudden emotional drop. These aren't random. They're reflections. The space has lost its freshness. And when freshness fades, luck follows. That's why in homes that tend to hold wealth, beauty is never ornamental. It's strategic. A fresh flower on the table is not a luxury. It's a current. A gentle, fragrant, color-soaked current that carries opportunity from thought into form. And when paired with subtle enhancers, like a few clean coins beneath the vase or a crystal like citrine tucked gently among the stems, that current becomes focused, directional, precise. It doesn't just make the space feel better, it makes the space work better. So ask yourself, when you think about bringing wealth into your life, are you making space for beauty, or are you skipping straight to effort? Are you feeding your senses the way you feed your ambition? Or have you mistaken silence for peace and stillness for balance? Because a home without nature doesn't stay neutral, it slowly becomes numb. And numb spaces rarely attract joy. Flowers break that numbness. They speak life into the silence. And they do it without noise, without instruction, without needing to be explained. And maybe you've never thought of it that way before. Maybe flowers were just a gift you received sometimes. Something to photograph, to enjoy briefly, then discard. But what if their real purpose was never to impress, but to guide? What if every bloom was a reminder that your home needs moments of softness to stay strong, moments of scent to stay awake, moments of beauty to stay open? Because when a home is alive, it knows how to listen. And flowers, fresh, full, and placed with love, are how that listening begins. Number 7, salt, the invisible shield you never thought to use. If fresh flowers bring softness and renewal into the home, then salt does something entirely different. It doesn't bloom, it doesn't glow. It doesn't scent the room or brighten the table. But in its stillness, it holds something far more ancient, something that has quietly protected homes, rituals, and people for centuries. Salt doesn't decorate, salt defends. And yet, despite its power, most people overlook it. They place importance on safes, passwords, and bank locks to protect their finances. but forget the energy field where that fortune begins. Because in Feng Shui, what guards your money isn't always material, it's energetic. And few substances shield energy more effectively than salt. Let's begin with a simple truth most people never consider. Money flows where energy is clean, and energy stays clean when the space it lives in is being regularly filtered. Salt is that filter. It doesn't fight energy. It doesn't repel it with force. It absorbs, it softens, it neutralizes. Like a sponge that never boasts about what it's holding, salt gathers the emotional debris of your space. The frustration after an argument, the tension that lingers after a stressful day, the subtle anxiety of overthinking that clings to the corners of a room. And once it collects these fragments, it holds them until you decide to release them. Not dramatically, not ceremonially, but quietly through the simple act of replacing the salt. The practice of placing a bowl of salt on your dining table, or discreetly in a corner near it, isn't about superstition. It's about energetic hygiene. The same way you wipe your counters, wash your dishes, and sweep your floor, salt maintains the clarity of the space you cannot see. And when your space is clear, decisions feel lighter. Communication feels easier. Fortune feels closer. Because clarity isn't a feeling, it's a field. And salt protects that field better than most people realize. But here's what makes salt different from the other objects we've explored. While flowers uplift, water activates, and candles energize, salt stabilizes. It grounds. It creates a boundary between what is welcome and what is not. And in homes where conflict runs high, or stress never quite leaves, or thoughts feel cloudy even when the room is clean, salt often reveals the problem. The room isn't messy. The energy is. And no amount of surface cleaning will fix what salt, in its quiet presence, can absorb and transform. Think about how many times you've entered a space and felt unsettled without knowing why. The light is fine. The layout is functional. Nothing is visibly wrong, but something feels off. That feeling is often the residue of unresolved energy. And the dining table, as the emotional nucleus of the home, absorbs more of that residue than you might expect. Salt resets that center. Not by masking the tension, but by giving it somewhere to go, somewhere to dissolve, somewhere to become neutral again. And maybe this is where something inside you pauses, because you've worked hard to build financial security, to manage your schedule, to maintain your space. But has the energy of that space been kept just as carefully? Or have you unknowingly allowed stagnant frequencies to pile up, mistaking emotional fatigue for normal stress? Salt doesn't need to be loud to be effective. A small white bowl. A clean scoop placed at the back edge of the table or beneath it. No label, no explanation, just presence. And over time, its effects speak for themselves. The tradition of using salt to protect and purify isn't new. It appears across cultures, belief systems, and generations. From monks placing bowls of salt outside meditation halls, to grandmothers scattering pinches at doorways after guests leave, the message is the same. Energy must be tended to just like the body. And if it isn't, it accumulates, it weighs, it blocks. That's why the practice of replacing your salt monthly or more often during times of high stress is less about routine and more about rhythm. Because a home in rhythm breathes. And a home that breathes well becomes a home where wealth feels safe to rest. And what's most revealing is that salt works whether you believe in it or not. Not because it's magic, but because your environment responds to intention, to care, to invisible acts of maintenance that shape the visible outcomes of your life. This isn't a question of whether salt works. It's a question of whether the space you live in is being energetically cleaned with the same consistency as your floors, your windows, your clothes. Because if you've ever felt stuck in patterns that don't match your effort, if you've ever felt like something is holding you back that you can't quite name, salt might be the missing reset. And like everything in Feng Shui, how you treat the salt matters. Use fresh, unprocessed salt when possible. Coarse sea salt or pink Himalayan work well. Place it in a ceramic or glass bowl, not metal, to keep its field stable. Keep it dry, untouched, and out of reach from pets or clutter. Let it do what it's meant to do without interruption. And when it's time to replace it, do so with quiet gratitude, and then discard the old salt far from your home, flushed, buried, or scattered outside, not recycled back into the space. That closure matters, because when you release what was absorbed, you make room for something lighter to enter. And here's the part few people realize: salt isn't just defensive. It also reveals where healing is needed. A bowl of salt that clumps too quickly, smells oddly, or darkens faster than usual might be telling you something about the energy of your home. Maybe an unresolved tension needs addressing. Maybe a repetitive thought pattern needs clearing. Maybe your home is holding more for you than you're holding for yourself. And that's not judgment, that's invitation. Because every space has the capacity to reset, it just needs help. So while others may rely on strategy, on locks and alarms and spreadsheets to protect their money, you'll begin to understand the power of tending to the field underneath it all. The energy that makes strategy effective. The clarity that makes planning useful. The softness that makes wealth stay once it arrives. Because a home that's energetically heavy can push abundance away no matter how well it's managed. But a home that's light, balanced, and protected, sometimes all it takes is a bowl of salt to return that balance. And when that balance is restored, so is everything else. Number 8, cinnamon. Ignite what salt prepared. If salt is the quiet force that clears and stabilizes a space, then cinnamon is what gives that space momentum. Salt absorbs. It neutralizes, protects, prepares. But once the room is clean, energetically still, grounded, and ready, what then? What fills the new space that's been opened? That's where cinnamon steps in. Because in Feng Shui and in countless energetic traditions across cultures, cinnamon is the spark, an aromatic accelerator that doesn't just invite wealth but stirs it awake and drives it forward with intention and heat. Think of cinnamon not as a symbol but as a catalyst. It doesn't sit passively on the table like a crystal or a bowl of salt. It activates, it infuses, it transforms stillness into motion. And that motion is exactly what so many people are unconsciously missing, especially when they've done all the right things, but their results still feel stuck. The energy feels clean, the space looks beautiful, the rituals are present, but nothing's moving. And that's not a flaw in their effort. It's often a lack of ignition. Because here's the quiet truth. Many homes are energetically prepared to receive wealth but haven't signaled that they're ready to pursue it. And in Feng Shui, fire is the element that bridges desire and action. It takes what you hope for and turns it into something magnetic. Cinnamon, being a fire-aligned herb, is one of the most accessible ways to bring that quality into your environment. It works not through belief but through frequency. Its scent opens, its warmth expands, and its presence disrupts any lingering stagnation that salt may have cleared but not yet replaced. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt alert, clear, even slightly uplifted, without knowing why? That's cinnamon. Not in name, but in function. That's what happens when energy is gently pushed from stillness into circulation. Not rushed, not burned out, just nudged. Cinnamon does that energetically. It nudges spaces forward. And when placed in the right corners of the home, especially around money symbols, kitchen spaces, or entry points, It whispers to the environment, "It's time." And maybe this is where something begins to shift in your own understanding. Because you've likely been focused on protection, on keeping things safe, on holding onto what you have. But at what point does protecting become pausing? At what point does care turn into caution that stifles growth? Salt builds a boundary, but cinnamon builds momentum. And momentum is what breaks income plateaus, revitalizes your sense of timing, and reminds the energy around you that wealth isn't just something to hold, it's something to generate. That's why in so many energy traditions, cinnamon is used when people feel energetically stuck. Not just financially, but emotionally. When ideas feel flat, when passion feels distant, when movement feels unreachable. Cinnamon reintroduces that fire, not as chaos, but as propulsion. It's not wild heat. It's focused, directional, intentional heat. And when placed with clarity on your dining table, it serves not only as a scent or a spice, but as a symbol that this household is no longer waiting for abundance. It's creating the conditions for it to accelerate. But how you use cinnamon matters. It's not enough to sprinkle it casually. The placement must be meaningful, the gesture intentional. One method is to create a small wealth dish. Add a few coins, a pinch of cinnamon, and place it in the center of the table or near your wealth corner. This simple composition becomes a live, energetic amplifier. Another method is to mix cinnamon into your cleaning water, allowing it to infuse your home's surfaces with a quiet pulse of financial stimulation. And for the especially attentive, a light dusting of cinnamon inside the wallet, just in the corners, can subtly shift how you interact with money every time you reach for it. The reason these practices work isn't because cinnamon holds a secret, it's because it holds a pattern, a vibration, one that your home can recognize as aligned with movement, not stagnation. And when that pattern repeats, through ritual, scent, and placement, your home begins to shift its role. It stops merely holding your energy and starts participating in it. That's when coincidences appear, delays dissolve, and goals that once felt distant start arriving more quickly than expected. Not because the external world changed, but because your inner environment stopped resisting momentum. And perhaps that's what you've needed to hear. Not another instruction, not another list, but a reminder that part of your energetic field has been waiting for permission to move. And cinnamon, in its warmth and clarity, is that permission made visible. It's the moment your home goes from passive to active, from waiting to initiating, from balance to rise. And yet, like fire, cinnamon must be respected. Too much, used too often, can lead to restlessness. That's why it's paired best with salt. Salt holds, cinnamon moves. One clears, the other activates. One protects, the other propels. When used together in rhythm, they create a space that feels both safe and alive, a home that's not only free from bad luck but aligned with continuous opportunity. So ask yourself, not as a ritualist, but as someone curating the life you want. When was the last time your home felt alive with direction? When was the last time your space didn't just feel protected but energized? Have you been holding onto peace so tightly that you've forgotten how to invite progress? Because safety isn't the final destination, it's the platform, and cinnamon is what reminds you to step forward. A small dish, a subtle scent, a warming pulse through the room. It doesn't scream, it doesn't overwhelm, it just nudges the atmosphere back into motion. And sometimes motion is all that's needed to break through a cycle that felt endless. Because when salt cleans the stage, it's cinnamon that steps onto it and says, "Let's begin." Number 9, crystal ball, the centerpiece that sees it all. By now, your table has been layered with symbols. Coins for anchoring, candles for warmth, water for flow, flowers for freshness, salt for cleansing, and cinnamon for ignition. But without a core, without a still, centered object that holds it all in balance, even these rituals can begin to drift, scattered like puzzle pieces without the final binding frame. That's where the crystal ball enters, not as decoration, but as the unspoken stabilizer. The quiet centerpiece that doesn't just sit in the middle of the table, it listens, it absorbs, it mirrors. And sometimes, it reveals what you didn't even know your space was holding. Because in Feng Shui, the dining table is more than a place of nourishment. It's an energy circle. And at the center of any powerful circle lies the axis, the one point everything else orients around. The crystal ball becomes that point. It's not loud, it's not moving, but its stillness is its strength. It gathers the chaos, smooths the sharp edges, and turns the emotional noise of daily life into something that feels centered, held, less volatile, more whole. And in a world where tension often lingers silently, unspoken stress between family members, subtle resentments, delayed conversations, the crystal ball becomes an invisible moderator. Not through magic, but through presence, through symmetry, through the message it quietly delivers to the room. Let this space hold what words cannot. You may not think something so simple could have that effect. But pause for a moment and consider this. How many times has your table felt energetically crowded, even when it wasn't physically cluttered? How many meals have felt rushed or emotionally tight, even when everyone showed up on time? That tightness isn't always about people. It's often about the absence of energetic anchoring. Without a center, energy bounces, it ricochets. It doesn't know where to land. And in Feng Shui, that disorientation builds over time, not just in the room, but in your decisions, your finances, your clarity. That's why the crystal ball matters. It gives energy somewhere to return to, somewhere to reorganize, somewhere to reflect before it becomes reaction. But not all crystal balls are equal. The material matters, the color matters, the way it's cared for matters. For households focused on financial flow and grounded prosperity, yellow quartz is especially powerful. It carries the frequency of focused abundance, not chaotic windfalls, but steady, thoughtful growth. And when placed in the center of the table, not off to the side, not buried behind a centerpiece, but truly centered, it acts like a gravity well for harmony. A small field of clarity that pulls in distraction, stabilizes it, and gently returns it as calm. That center then becomes the starting point of every meal, every conversation, every moment of shared connection that the dining table is meant to hold. And perhaps more importantly, the crystal ball reflects more than just balance. It reflects what's missing. It may sound poetic, but anyone who has lived with one knows this to be true. When tension rises in the home, when clarity dissolves, when the mood of the space feels strained, the ball begins to feel dimmer, less vibrant, slightly distant. And when harmony is restored, when emotions are clear, when energy is clean and flowing, the ball almost seems to glow differently. That's not imagination. That's resonance. That's your home speaking back to you through the objects you've entrusted with its energy. But here's where the practice deepens, because a dusty, neglected crystal ball is worse than no ball at all. It becomes a symbol of forgotten care, a reminder that the stillness we once honored has become overlooked. And that's the emotional charge it then brings into the room, not stability, but stagnation. That's why it must be cleaned regularly. Not obsessively, but mindfully, with a soft cloth, with intention, with a moment of awareness that says, I see you, I remember why you're here. That moment alone begins to reset the field. And the size of the ball matters too, not just in inches, but in proportion to the table. Too small and it disappears, too large and it dominates, but just right and it becomes a silent guidepost, not flashy, not spiritualized, just quietly present, just enough to remind everyone seated that this space has a core, and that core is calm. In a time when so many homes are chasing balance through schedules, strategies, or space-saving hacks, the crystal ball offers something far more organic. The felt sense of centeredness, not just in the table, but in the people who sit around it. This is especially true for families where emotional undercurrents are part of the landscape, where generations live together, or conversations carry old tones, or meals are sometimes tinged with tension. In those homes, the crystal ball can become an energetic equalizer, not because it changes people, but because it changes the space people inhabit. And when the space is balanced, the pressure to perform disappears. Reactions soften, words arrive more slowly, and silence feels less threatening, more like a shared pause instead of a wall. That shift can change the trajectory of a day or a life. But maybe most surprisingly, the crystal ball isn't just about correction, it's about reflection. It shows you what's already working, what's already healed, what's already humming. And in moments where life feels right, where family is connected, where money flows and laughter lingers, it mirrors that joy back at you, amplifying the sensation so that the space feels not just functional but sacred. And that sacredness doesn't require candles or incense or ceremony. It just requires the willingness to give your table a center and to let that center speak. So ask yourself, not intellectually but intuitively, what sits at the center of your table right now? Is there anything anchoring the energy? Is there any object quietly tending to the emotional rhythms of your space? Or has the center been left open, inviting not calm, but confusion? Because energy, like people, needs leadership. And leadership in a home isn't always loud. Sometimes it's round, smooth, quiet, and placed right in the middle of everything, not to be the focus, but to help everything else focus. Because in a space where every object holds meaning, the one that sits at the center holds the most. And when that object is a crystal ball, clear, grounded, intentionally placed, you give your home a kind of compass. A place to return to when things feel scattered. A space that says, here at least there is balance. And that balance becomes the pattern that begins to shape your relationships, your mindset, and your fortune, not all at once, but consistently, daily, gently, and with more impact than you might imagine. Because sometimes the most powerful way to support your life is simply to place something steady at the center and let it hold what you've been trying to carry alone. The smallest objects often carry the heaviest energy. You've probably walked past your dining table 1,000 times, sometimes clean, sometimes cluttered, sometimes used, sometimes forgotten. But have you ever truly seen it as the energetic gatekeeper of your home? Because that's what it is. It's not just where meals are served, it's where energy is exchanged, where your mindset is reinforced, where your household's future is quietly shaped each day. And what you place on it speaks louder than you think. Coins or red envelopes whisper security. Candles activate the fire of momentum. A full water pitcher keeps cash flow alive. Fresh fruit radiates prosperity. Bread says we are safe. Flowers lift emotional air. Salt absorbs what words can't. Cinnamon ignites what's ready to grow. And the crystal ball, it holds the center so everything else can breathe. But here's the hard truth. Most people forget this. They think cleaning the table is enough. That wiping away the mess resets the energy. But what they miss is that energy doesn't respond to cleanliness alone. It responds to clarity. And without objects that are placed with clarity, even the most spotless home can feel emotionally heavy, financially stuck, or subtly off balance. This is where the quiet mistakes begin. Not dramatic, just consistent. A table left bare after guests leave, not because of minimalism, but because of neglect. A bowl of fruit forgotten until it rots. A salt dish never changed. A candle blown out too hard. A coin that ends up beside the trash. These aren't just household oversights. They are energetic blind spots. And when repeated day after day, they create a kind of static that builds up in the home and eventually shows up in your life. That's why this entire journey through your dining table has never really been about objects. It's been about what they represent, and whether those representations are helping you step forward or quietly holding you back. So ask yourself not just what's missing from my table, but what's missing from my field of attention. Have you set the table for convenience or for intention? Are your objects just decorations or are they allies? Because the truth is, most people don't fail at energy alignment because they don't believe in it. They fail because they forget to practice it daily. And the dining table is one of the first places that shows whether your practice is grounded or accidental. Let's be honest, nearly everyone makes these mistakes. They think red envelopes are only for Lunar New Year, that flowers are only for guests, that candles are for mood, not energy, that bread is just a carb, that water is just a drink. But here's what sets those who thrive apart. They don't wait for occasion. They create alignment daily, even in the smallest moments, even when no one's watching. Even when it's just them, their meal, and the table. Because they understand that the universe listens most closely when you're not trying to impress it, but when you're simply present with what you have. So tonight, when you look at your dining table, don't just ask if it looks good. Ask if it feels right. Ask if it reflects the life you say you want to live. Ask if the symbols on it support who you're becoming or reinforce who you've outgrown. Because prosperity doesn't always show up in big gestures. It doesn't need a remodel or a renovation. Sometimes it only needs a full picture, a glowing candle, a bowl of fruit, a clean crystal. And maybe that's the deepest truth of all, that what you've been waiting for isn't missing. It's just misplaced. It's just buried beneath habits you forgot to question. So take one last look at your table, not as furniture, but as a frequency. Because in the end, you're not decorating, you're deciding. And what you decide to place on that table is what your home will echo back into your life.